Rejected by 100 people for being poor, he revealed the surprising secret to find his amazing wife. In the tiny town of Maplewood, Jake, a 28-year-old mechanic with grease-stained hands and a heart full of dreams, felt the crushing weight of a reputation built upon the size of a paycheck. Each rejection from women 100 in total stung like needles, reminding him that in a world where financial status was king, his loving heart and sense of humor were simply not enough. The dim lighting of the auto repair shop matched his spirit flickering with hope 1 minute and snuffed out by reality the next. He often watched from his workstation as couples strolled through town, laughter ringing in the air. The echo of their happiness only deepened his isolation. Growing up amidst constant financial struggles had instilled in him a fear of inadequacy. He often grappled with that unrelenting voice in his head that whispered, "You'll never be enough." Each day blurred into the next, a monotonous loop of fixing cars and dreaming of escape. But the pull of his self-doubt held him captive. Just beyond the cluttered workbench, Mrs. Thompson, his wise neighbor, often visited. With bright blue eyes and a penchant for storytelling, she breathed a different kind of life into his turmoil. "You're worth more than just what's in your bank account, Jake," she'd say. Her words became his anchor in an ever-churning sea of despair. But while her advice sank deep, doubts bubbled up. What did she know of rejection, of financial strain? Then one day, Mrs. Thompson encouraged him to showcase his true talent: automotive design. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying, a tantalizing glimpse into a world he feared he could never reach. He cautiously began posting videos online, pouring his heart into each custom car design, steadily attracting a following. It felt like a flicker of light in his darkness. Yet shadows loomed, embodied by Dixon Motors, a corporate titan lurking on the outskirts, scrutinizing his every move. Their looming presence filled him with panic. As his online fame grew, Jake's spirit faltered, overwhelmed by the looming threat of sabotage. Were they watching? Surely, they would crush his passion if he dared to disrupt their monopoly. Each time he felt bolstered by the community's support, another wave of trepidation washed over him. What if they believed the narrative that he was just a poor mechanic, unworthy of admiration? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. In the midst of his chaos, Emma stepped into his life, a vibrant city artist searching for authenticity. Her passion drew him in like a magnet. Conversations flowed easily between them, an intoxicating blend of shared dreams and ambitions. She saw him, truly saw him. For the first time, he felt like a person, not a dollar amount. But as willow tree branches bowed in shadow, whispers began to twist around them. Rumors of jealousy and suspicion crept through Maplewood, questioning Emma's intentions. Jake's heart tightened at the thought that in small towns, even love could become a currency, zero-sum against financial standing. Just when he thought he could trust in his profound connection with Emma, Dixon Motors launched an antagonistic strategy to dismantle everything he'd built. Anxiety clawed at him day and night. Would she see him as just a mechanic? Would she abandon him like everyone else had? The walls of doubt closed in around him, suffocating. With everything he cherished hanging by a thread, Jake squeezed his eyes shut, wrestling against the cacophony of fears and questions. Would he fight against the tide of negativity, or allow the seductive grip of self-doubt to pull him under? Just when he thought he might discover a way through despair, a shocking revelation about his past bubbled to the surface. It was a truth that could change everything, for better or for worse. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the memory clawed its way to the forefront of his mind, a fleeting moment buried beneath countless layers of inadequacy and fear. The revelation struck him like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the dark corners of his past. He remembered vividly the day he stumbled across his father's old workshop, dusty and faded, hidden behind their crumbling house. There lay unfinished projects, relics of his father's dreams and a man he never truly understood. Was it possible? Could he inherit his father's passion for design, the very thing that had eluded him all these years? A wave of determination surged within him, clashing violently against the familiar voice of doubt whispering that he wasn't equipped neither in skill nor in worth. But a spark ignited. He could reclaim that passion, breathe life into his father's forgotten dreams and make them his own. Perhaps, in doing so, he would also unearth something vital within himself, a sense of identity that transcended financial barriers. In the following days, Jake immersed himself in his father's old sketches, studying the curves and contours of vehicles that never saw the road. He felt the longing for expression pull at him, pushing back against years of rejection and self-doubt. The designs called to him like a siren song, urging him to bring them to life. Each stroke of his pencil felt like a liberation, a shedding of the weight that had held him captive for so long. This was his moment to challenge the narrative that had been cast upon him. He was more than just a mechanic, he was an artist of mechanics, capable of creating beauty from metal and grease. Fueled by this newfound intensity, he set out to design his first true piece in homage to his father. He poured every ounce of skill he had acquired through years of practice into this project. His hands now moved with purpose, excitement coursing through him. Each day, he carved out time after work to labor over the design, his spirit breaking free from the chains of expectation. But shadows loomed larger as Dixon Motors noticed his efforts. Their tactics grew more aggressive, sending emails that threatened copyright infringements, casting doubt on his authenticity. Panic bubbled under his resolve. He couldn't let them take this from him, from the legacy he barely understood. The fear of losing his newfound sense of self nudged at him, tightening its grip once more. With each reprimanding notice, Jake's determination transformed into a fierce desire to confront the corporation that had long dictated the terms of his existence. The moment had come. He was tired of running from fear. With Emma at his side, encouraging him, he made a plan. It was time to battle not only for his designs but for his identity in a world that had written him off. But would he execute this plan and risk everything? The possibility of failure loomed like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over his budding confidence. As he drafted the final sketches, seeking approval from his growing online following, Jake faced an irrevocable choice. Would he push past his doubts and confront Dixon Motors head-on, or retreat into the shadows of societal judgment once more? In this pivotal moment, with his heart racing and purpose driving him, a text from Emma lit up his phone with an invitation to a community art showcase that could put his work front and center. The thought grazed his mind, revealing a deeper truth. Could this be the moment he showcases not just his designs, but the very essence of who he was? As he stood at the edge of a precipice facing fear, ambition, and the whispers of his past, Jake could feel the winds of change threatening to engulf him. Would he soar or would he plummet? The decision awaited him, and with it came the lure of transformation that could alter his path forever. It was now or never. The days drifted into a blur as Jake wrestled with his own thoughts, the pressure mounting around him like a tightening vice. Each hour spent in the workshop fueled both his drive and his anxiety. With Emma beside him, meticulously measuring his sketches and offering encouragement, Jake rattled between hope and despair. He was crafting a piece that resonated with him in ways he never anticipated. However, the specter of Dixon Motors loomed larger, a constant reminder of the risk he was about to take. The text from Emma had sent his heart racing, sparking the possibility of exposure. What felt like a lifeline also stirred a tempest of fear inside him. He constantly questioned his worthiness. Could his designs stand alongside those of established artists? He never thought of himself as creative, instead confined to the identity of a mere mechanic. Yet, with every hour spent bringing his design closer to reality, an ember ignited a new narrative in his mind. On one particularly tense evening, he stared at a blank page, the shadows of self-doubt creeping back in. It was an almost paralyzing sensation. He could feel the weight of 100 past judgments pressing upon him. But then he recalled the sketches of his father. These were not merely designs but embodiments of dreams that had never been fulfilled. Understanding that this was his moment, inherited not just from blood but from legacy, infused a sense of clarity within him. He picked up his pencil, channeling the very essence of who he was into the lines that danced across the page. He transformed his anxiety into artistry, each stroke a confrontation of the fears that had held him back for so long. With every curve and angle, he realized he wasn't just illustrating a vehicle, he was redefining his identity. He was daring to be vulnerable, to share not only his skill but also his soul. As the design neared completion, Jake faced an uphill battle. Would his work stand up against the corporate machinery of Dixon Motors? In that moment of introspection, he understood that the showcase was more than just an opportunity, it was a declaration of his newfound belief in himself as an artist. He thought back to the emails he'd received, words meant to instill fear. Now, they felt like insignia on his armor rather than chains of his past. Are you ready to show the world what you can do? Emma's voice penetrated his thoughts, her eyes full of faith as she leaned against the workshop door. Ready? I don't know. What if they don't understand? Jake questioned, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Then show them who you are. It's not just about the design, Jake. It's about your story. Her encouragement steeled him. Perhaps it was time to lay his soul bare, but Jake was still grappling with the implications of confrontation. The community showcase loomed not just as a platform for his work, but as a battleground against Dixon Motors, a corporation built on uniformity rather than the individuality that pulsated through his veins. What if his vulnerability led to nothing but rejection? What if unveiling his peace only served to bring the full force of Dixon's wrath upon him? Yet, with every pulsing beat of his heart, he felt something escape the confines of his chest, an aching desire to claim the piece of himself that had been denied for so long. The chance to display his work transformed into a necessity to champion his own identity. As the night wore on, the pressure crystallized into a profound sense of urgency. Jake felt the need to make a decision, the showcase serving not just as a premiere of design but as a sideshow of his internal battle. The time had come to face not only his designs but to confront the shadows of his past, the intimidating corporate giant ready to pounce the moment he reached for his dreams. Tomorrow would be pivotal, a moment woven with tension, potential failure, and the instinctual drive for freedom. Would Jake rise to the occasion or let his fear swallow him whole? Boldness shimmered in the air, and tomorrow would unveil which path he would choose. Morning sunlight spilled through the workshop windows, illuminating the room in a soft glow, yet Jake felt anything but calm. The day had arrived, the very brink of a reckoning. With each tick of the clock, anticipation coiled tighter within him, an electric current surging through his veins. He studied his design, now fully fleshed out, a sculpture in metal that embodied both his labor and his soul. Somehow, it felt heavier today, laden with the weight of unuttered words and unexamined fears. As he polished the final details, Jake's mind danced through shadows of self-doubt. What if the critics couldn't see past the unique curves and uncover the raw emotion beneath? Would they merely judge the surface, dismissing his years of experimentation as misguided enthusiasm? The nagging thought rooted deeper. What if Dixon Motors decided to crush his spirit the moment he dared to unfurl the banner of his identity? Moments later, Emma appeared at the door once more, a vibrant presence cutting through the fog of his thoughts. Excited, bright. She beamed, an enthusiasm he both admired and envied. Excited might be an overstatement, Jake replied, a half-hearted smile betraying his internal struggle. Jake, remember this, she said softly, stepping closer. No one knows your story better than you do. You need only to express that. You're not just a mechanic, you're an artist, a creator. It's time to own that. Her words twisted within him, taking hold like the ignition switch in an engine. Could he really redefine himself at this stage? He had spent so long beneath the shadow of self-imposed limitations, shackled by fears of inferiority. Perhaps today was the day he could finally embrace the unpredictable nature of artistry, the chance to morph failure into the fuel for his creative fire. He turned to face his design, a breathtaking synthesis of curves and angles. It represented both his father's legacy and his own aspirations. This was more than just a submission, it was a proclamation, a visible manifestation of his journey. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, letting his internal conflict coalesce into something tangible. Then, in a flash, the reality of the impending confrontation with Dixon Motors coursed through him, igniting a flicker of defiance. They might have the resources, but he possessed something they couldn't replicate, his truth. With that realization, some of the weight lifted, like a veiled curtain being drawn away from the light. I need a moment, Jake said abruptly, slipping into the back of the workshop where sketches adorned the walls like trophies of a hard-fought battle. His pulse quickened as he reviewed his past attempts. Those sketches had been born from fear and doubt. Yet now, they served as stepping stones, each mistake a lesson fostered in the womb of adversity. Armed with renewed determination, he returned to Emma. You are right. This is my moment. I am ready to share my truth, he affirmed, his voice steadier than before. 100%, she replied, her eyes sparkling with a mix of pride and excitement. As they gathered their things, a flicker of apprehension lingered in the back of Jake's mind like a storm cloud ready to burst. With each step toward the showcase, he grappled with questions that churned like a cyclone. How would the world receive his work? Would he truly summon courage in the face of an intimidating force? While the workshop door swung open, an uninvited thought punctured his emerging confidence. What if today proved his inadequacy? But he quickly countered that with a realization, today was not about approval, it was about acceptance, not just from others, but of himself. But then an unexpected message blinked on his phone from a colleague associated with Dixon Motors, emptying his resolve. Looking forward to seeing you at the showcase. Hope your design doesn't disappoint. The air felt electric with anticipation, fraught with the hidden potential for triumph or catastrophe. Jake's heart raced as he took his first steps into the unknown. Would he face the audience as the artist he now claimed to be, or would he revert to the scared mechanic he'd always been? The crowd awaited his arrival, every pair of eyes potentially holding judgment. He was about to unveil not only a design but the deepest parts of himself. The moment hinged between vulnerability and judgment. Would he emerge a victor, or would his fears overwhelm him once more? The stage lay ahead, shimmering like a mirage, whispering promises of revelation and dread. The crowd buzzed like a hive of wasps, each whisper buzzing through the air and suffusing Jake's senses with paralyzing doubt. As he stepped onto the platform, the expansive hall around him felt like a coliseum, the audience seated and waiting eagerly for his moment. Sweat trickled down his back, his palms clammy against the metal sculpture cradled in his arms. He had never felt so exposed. But there was no going back now, he had come too far to retreat into the shadows. He placed his creation on the pedestal at center stage, facing the sea of faces. Each bright gaze felt like a spotlight proud of expectation that pierced through his skin. It was no longer just metal and artistry resting there, it was a manifestation of his very identity, the culmination of every challenge, yearning, and hope he had wrestled with. "Good afternoon, everyone," Jake started, his voice wavering slightly but gaining strength with every syllable. "What you see before you is not merely a sculpture. It's a piece of my journey." He glanced at Emma standing to the side, her encouraging nod momentarily staving off the swell of self-doubt. There was something transformative in the air, a rush that urged him to press forward. "This isn't just about aesthetics. It's about the struggle of creation, the heartbeats behind each curve and angle." His words flowed more freely now as he spoke of his late father, a mechanic who instilled in him a passion for understanding machines, not just their mechanics but their stories. Each sketch was a whisper of his father's influence. The audience sat in rapt silence, and for a fleeting moment, Jake felt the weight of judgment lifting. "What if this," he continued, gesturing toward the sculpture, "isn't perfect? What if I've made mistakes?" A chuckle rippled through the crowd, and he took a breath. "Well, that's the essence of artistry. It's messy. It's not always understood. But it's real." Suddenly, a voice interrupted one he recognized. "Certainly a bold approach, Jake." It was one of the lead designers from Dixon Motors, Robert Hayes, oozing condescension. "But is it really innovative, or just a collection of weary cliches disguised as creativity?" Jake felt his heart drop. The immediate confrontation rattled him, but rather than shrinking into himself, anger sparked beneath his skin. "If by weary cliches you mean the rawness of humanity, then yes," he sure-footedly replied, challenging the weight of Hayes' words. "Art is not merely innovation, it's about honesty. Something that transforms the mundane into something tangible." The audience murmured, sensing the tension igniting a deeper discussion. Jake felt emboldened, newfound clarity clearing the fog of insecurity that had lingered. Was this what Emma meant by owning it? Perhaps it was not solely about how they saw him, but how he chose to see himself. "What I've created embodies struggle, growth, and transformation," Jake declared, fixing his gaze on the sculpture. "The struggle to break free from the definitions others place upon us. I am more than a mechanic, I am a creator, an artist with a story, and that story deserves to be told." Discomfort rippled through him, here was his chance, yet doubt lingered like a shadow. Would they understand? Would they see the truth behind the external? In that moment, Jake realized something vital. This was not just a presentation of his work, it was an invitation for the audience to reflect on their own constraints. He turned to Hayes. "If you're looking for flawless lines, you're missing the beauty. Imperfection holds a mirror to our experiences. Every flaw invites a dialogue, a chance to evolve." The room hung in a pregnant pause, eyes darting between Jake and Hayes, the tension palpable. A rush of adrenaline surged through Jake's veins. Had he shifted the narrative in his favor? Was he engaging with them not just about competition, but about connectivity? As applause began to rise, a sense of relief washed over him. Jake knew he had crossed a threshold today, one not defined by external judgments but forged by inner acceptance and determination, yet, he could still feel the weight of relentless scrutiny pressing against him as the applause settled. He didn't know if today would yield victory or condemnation, but a question echoed through his mind, refusing to dissipate. What would he risk next, and how far would he push his own boundaries to find his authentic self beyond judgment? As the room quieted, Jake took a deep breath, a mixture of hope and fear swirling within him. This was merely the beginning of a much bigger journey. What awaited him beyond this moment? Only time would tell, as new challenges loomed just out of sight. The applause faded, but the weight of the moment lingered, swirling within Jake like a tempest. He stepped down from the podium, his heart still racing from the confrontation with Hayes. Each footfall felt heavier as the reality of what he had done began to settle in. He had fought for his voice in a space that was supposed to be dominated by titans of the industry. Yet, the euphoria of defiance was tempered by a creeping apprehension. What if the applause had been sympathetic rather than genuine? What if, behind polite smiles, the audience had only seen an ambitious amateur desperately searching for validation? Jake had always been cautious, tempering his expectations to avoid disappointment. Today's boldness shattered that fragile equilibrium. He found Emma amidst the dispersing crowd, her eyes bright with pride. "Jake, that was incredible. You really took on Hayes." Not many people would have the courage to stand up to his kind of condescension. Her words ignited a flicker of hope in him. Perhaps he could be more than he once believed. "Thanks, Emma. I just didn't want to let his opinion define everything I've worked for. Maybe this is how I should approach my art fearlessly." "Exactly. You've always had the talent, but standing your ground adds a much-needed dimension. You're evolving." Her voice calmed him in the whirlwind of his thoughts, igniting an urgency within to push forward. As he prepared to leave, however, doubt nagged at him like a persistent itch. What if his newfound boldness was misplaced? Would the industry embrace him, or would he remain a footnote in its vast history? He reminded himself that self-doubt paralyzed progress, and he had resolved not to retreat behind those walls again. That night, restless sleep replaced solace. Images of Hayes' condescending smirk haunted him, intertwining with recollections of his father's words about perseverance. "Don't let others dictate your worth, son," his father used to say, voice steady, capable hands working on a stubborn engine. "You define who you are every day." What did it mean to define himself authentically in this unforgiving landscape? He pulled out a notepad in the flickering light of his desk lamp, heart racing with every scribble. Someone would see him and what he had to offer. Each design and sketch showcased more than technical proficiency, they captured the essence of struggle, revelation, and self-acceptance. The next day, Jake began to formulate a plan. He would set up a portfolio, a manifesto declaring who he was as an artist. It wouldn't be mere sculptures, it would be the narrative of his journey woven through materials, colors, and facets of his life. Each piece would convey not just aesthetics but stark realities rooted in humanity. He envisioned an exhibition that would shake the preconceived notions that art had to adhere to industry standards. With each stroke on that notepad, excitement coursed through him. He would take risks. Following a path dictated by external expectations had only led him to doubt himself. Now he would curate his identity on his own terms. He felt a resolve strengthen within, igniting a fire that warned him now was not the time to falter. As he walked through the city streets, a renewed determination surged through him, fueled by the animosity toward complacency. But uncertainty still loomed. Would this boldness pay off, or would it lead to greater rejection? The thought sent shivers down his spine. He spotted a gallery on the corner, its walls housing art that whispered of perspectives he barely understood but yearned to explore. His heart raced. What if that could be his space one day? As he pushed open the door, a flood of energy washed over him. Within this haven of creativity lay potential and opportunity, but also the specter of judgment and critique. The moment of truth approached quickly. What if his work, his voice, wasn't enough? Jake inhaled sharply, overwhelmed by the dichotomy of excitement and fear that flooded him. He was standing at the precipice of his evolution. But the stakes were high. How far? Was he willing to go to genuinely become the artist he aspired to be? In that crowded gallery, Jake's inner voice grew resolute, pushing him forward into the unknown. The time had come to confront his deepest fears head-on. Would he keep running from rejection, or would he raise his head and embrace the risks ahead? The door swung open, and Jake stepped inside, greeted by the vibrant chatter of art enthusiasts mingling with the intoxicating scent of oils and freshly dried clay. Each vibrant piece on the walls seemed alive, pulsing with a story that begged to be told. Yet standing amidst it all, he felt a crushing sense of unworthiness wash over him. Did he belong in this world? As he wandered from one artwork to the next, each piece evoked emotions he had not yet articulated. They resonated with an authenticity he was desperate to capture in his own work. How had their creator spurred such boldness? He couldn't help but analyze their approach, searching for answers like lifebuoys in unfamiliar waters. Behind their success lurked hidden struggles. Were they not just like him, wrestling with fears and doubts of their own? With renewed determination, he plucked a business card from a nearby table advertising an artist's workshop. Might this be the bridge to the confidence he so desperately sought? He slipped the card into his pocket, promising himself he would attend. Perhaps he could learn how to navigate this landscape, giving him the tools to express his truth with unforgiving clarity. Jake stepped outside, the hustle of the city enveloping him once again. The sunlight felt different, brighter somehow. There was potential lurking behind every shadow, every corner. Excitement bubbled within him. He realized he was ready to experiment unfettered in RAW.I. In the following days, he sketched and sculpted furiously, each piece a manifesto challenging conventional aesthetics. He wove fragments of his history into his art, the family heirlooms, the stories of triumph and loss, the very essence of what it meant to be human. This exploration molded his identity, fueling a fire he had long buried under layers of self-doubt. However, alongside inspiration crept those familiar pangs of insecurity. When he quieted the world around him, negative thoughts murmured incessantly. "What do you have to say that is worth hearing?" they mocked. Each night, he fought with these thoughts by channeling them into his art, a battle transmuted into vibrant strokes of color and emotion. Finally, the day arrived to attend the workshop. The studio buzzed with anticipation as he entered. Creatives from all walks of life gathered, each brimming with ideas that coursed through their veins. Jake was greeted by the facilitator, a seasoned artist with weathered hands and an electric presence. She opened with encouragement, prompting each participant to share their artistic journey. When it was Jake's turn, fear threatened to choke him. The spotlight felt searing. Yet, as he began to speak about the confrontation with Hayes, the desire to define his identity, something unexpected happened. He felt the room draw closer, attentively listening. His narrative shifted into something more significant. It was a connection, a shared understanding illuminated through vulnerability. Afterward, small groups formed for collaboration and critique. Jake discovered a supportive network enveloping him, who were not merely focused on praise but on growth. They understood that an artist's value was not merely in the work they produced but the courage to expose their heart and mind to the world. As he began to mesh with other artists, ideas ignited like wildfire. His confidence kicked aside the remnants of self-doubt, urging him to ask challenging questions and take creative risks he would have previously shied away from. The anticipation of critiques turned into an avenue for enhancement, and his work transformed into something quite profound. Yet amidst this bright growth, uneasiness hovered. Would he continually rise to meet expectations now that he had resolved to embrace risk? As the days morphed into weeks, Jake pondered whether he was still the same man who once feared rejection. What awaited him on the horizon, at the junction of vulnerability and ambition? One evening, after a long day of creation, he received a message from a prominent local gallery. They had seen his recent work displayed on social media, and they wanted to feature him. Their words were like a jolt of electric anticipation, a beam of light slicing through lingering doubts. With an invitation to showcase his pieces creeping into the forefront of his mind, a new question took shape. Would this moment mark the culmination of his evolution, or simply the beginning of a far deeper journey? Jake barely had time to breathe, weighing potential success against that omnipresent fear. What if he ended up facing rejection yet again? The next chapter of his life beckoned, racing toward the flame of ambition even as shadows of doubt remained ever at his heels. Jake set the phone down, the weight of the gallery's proposal settling into his bones like a heavy fog. For days, he walked around his cluttered studio, contemplating the impact of displaying his work to a wider audience. It wasn't just an exhibit, it was a proclamation of his identity, a declaration that he was here, ready to be scrutinized, judged, and potentially rejected once again. With a deep breath, he pulled out his sketchbook, flipping through pages filled with ideas sparked by vulnerability and introspection. Each drawing represented not just his identity but a raw honesty he believed could resonate with others. Yet, the looming deadline for submission gnawed at him relentlessly. Would he be able to meet it? Could his work withstand the rigor of expert critique? The workshop he'd recently attended had ignited a fire within him, but now it felt like a lighthouse beam flickering in a growing storm. He focused on the encouraging words from the facilitator, urging artists to be bold, to seek authenticity in their expression. But what if boldness led to failure? The thought stung as deeply as a critique from Hayes. Despite the self-doubt swarming his mind, Jake realized he needed to capture this moment, his transformation into an artist unafraid to reveal his heart. The pressure mounted, but he harnessed that energy into his sketches, channeling every fleeting worry and flicker of hope into vibrant colors and unstructured forms. As the days passed, he drew every breath with purpose, crafting a series that spoke to his journey of self-discovery. Each piece reflected a fragment of his past, revealing scars that had long held him captive. He began to see his sketches not merely as art but as a process of unearthing forgotten emotions. Yet the knowledge weighed heavily on him. The gallery's acceptance or rejection could either validate his evolution or move him further into the chasms of despair. The possibility of failure now fortified his resolve. He wrestled with the whispers of doubt that haunted him, growing louder as the submission deadline approached. What happens when they see the real you? They echoed, relentless and biting. On the eve of submission, Jake stood still before his canvas, a constellation of ideas swirling in his mind. As he began to paint, he realized that confronting the unknown was equally terrifying and exhilarating. He needed to depict the beauty in struggle, the strength found in vulnerability. With every stroke, the colors filled in the corners of his canvas, ghostly voices of fear dimming as they were transformed into artistic expression. Then, in a winding ebb between heart and mind, he made a bold decision. Instead of sending his polished pieces, he would showcase his unfinished work, the raw sketches woven together to represent his journey. Unrefined yet undeniably honest, these pieces encapsulated the struggle he had come to understand as essential to his growth. Jake felt a quiet confidence rise in tandem with the relentless anxiety. Perhaps this was the true essence of his art. It wasn't about perfection, it was about being genuine and brave. He worked tirelessly, submitting the completed pieces just moments before the deadline, a blend of doubt and excitement coursing through his veins. Hours turned into days as he awaited the gallery's response, the anxiety lingering like a shadow. Was he truly ready to showcase his vulnerability to the world? The question haunted him, whispering doubts that crept in like swift, stealthy thieves. Finally, the email arrived, sterner than he anticipated. As he opened it, a mix of hope and dread paralyzed him. Would the reception be one soaked in validation, or flayed open by rejection yet again? The moment hung delicately in the air, fraught with potential. And just like that, Jake confronted the climax of his journey. Would this be a moment of triumph or a disheartening fall? The answer loomed ahead, inching closer to the freedom he craved but feared to embrace. What awaited him next, hidden beneath the surface of possibility, was yet to be uncovered. Jake's hands trembled as he read the email, his heart racing against the suffocating silence of the room. The starkness of the gallery's rejection replayed in his mind like a cruel joke, an echo reverberating through the hollow chambers of his ambition. No words of encouragement graced the screen. Instead, the message felt like a definitive end, another financial and emotional burden pressing down on him. He felt a tide of disappointment wash over him, threatening to drown his resolve. Hence he risked everything by showcasing the rawness of his work. The decision, rooted in vulnerability and exploration, now seemed foolish in the face of impermanence. As he stared at the screen, he could almost hear the clamor of past critique swirling in his head, each dismissal adding weight to his frightful contemplation. Was he truly cut out for this path? Jake pushed himself away from the desk, the movement taking him out of that suffocating moment. He stepped into his studio. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the chaos, the canvases stacked against the wall, scattered paint tubes, and brushstrokes still stained on the floor. It was messy yet alive, each piece a testament to his struggle. He paced back and forth, the room seeming both an intimate cocoon and an expansive universe of possibility. As the initial sting of rejection morphed into something almost palpable, Jake's mind began to shift gears. He would not be defined by this setback. He grabbed his sketchbook, flipping through the pages with urgency. Each sketch felt like an exhale, familiar and comforting. With newfound determination, he resolved to explore the depth of that rejection, to transform the sharp edges of disappointment into something meaningful. Sitting in front of a blank canvas, he began to paint again, but this time the brush wasn't just a tool, it became a conduit for his frustrations, fears, and longings. Colors collided chaotically as he poured his emotions into the piece, each stroke infused with the lessons learned from the rejection. He would not hide behind polished imagery, his art needed to tell the full story. The beautiful chaos along with the pain. Days morphed into a rhythm where he painted constantly, channeling his turmoil into creation, pushing through the shadows of insecurity. Midway through one piece, he discovered an unexpected revelation, the freedom found in recognizing failure, the sheer weightlessness that came from letting go of perfectionism. The more he explored, the more he saw the patterns in his work, the unrefined chaos revealing the cause of truth about identity and personal struggle. Between bursts of creativity came moments of introspection. Jake conducted a self-analysis. What had truly motivated him to become an artist? Initially, it had been a pursuit of recognition, a frantic dash toward validation from others. But through this journey, he unearthed a deeper purpose. What he created was for himself, an outlet for expression and self-discovery. In permitting himself that honesty, he realized that true growth was often veiled in discomfort. However, the echoes of rejection still lingered in the corners of his mind. What would his next steps be? The thought of exposing his work yet again, even to a different audience, felt like standing on the precipice of a cliff. There were new galleries, new opportunities, but would he dare to face scrutiny once more? Just as Jake contemplated the decision before him, a flicker of inspiration sparked within. If he truly wanted to connect with others, he needed to share the experience behind his art, not just the art itself. Perhaps a different approach, more storytelling intertwined with the visuals, would resonate with people who had faced similar struggles. Caught in an exhilarating moment of clarity, he pulled out a fresh canvas. The fear still loomed, whispering doubts that danced precariously close, but Jake pressed on. It was time for a new chapter, one that defined his journey, his revelations, and, ultimately, his work. The time had come to face the audience, but more than that, to face himself. What awaited him now was further self-exploration, intertwined with the public's perception of his soul exposed through art. Would he find the strength to unveil his authentic self and receive the recognition he'd always sought? The sun shone brightly over Maplewood, illuminating the day of Jake's long-awaited art exhibition. Months of passion, resistance, and self-discovery culminated in this moment, and as Jake surveyed the gallery he had secured, pride settled within him. Here was a space that held the essence of his journey, the highs, the lows, the lessons learned through rejection and raw vulnerability. With the walls adorned by his sketches and designs, each piece told a story, echoes of his father's legacy mingling with the weight of his own battles. From rough drafts to finished artwork, they embodied not just aesthetics but a struggle against conformity, the struggle to break free from definitions prescribed by society, particularly by the corporate entity that once loomed over him. Jake's heart raced with anticipation as attendees began to filter into the gallery. Without the echoes of self-doubt, he welcomed them with open arms, grateful for the opportunity to share not only his designs but also the vulnerability encapsulated within each piece. This wasn't merely a showcase, it was a projection of himself, a proclamation of his evolution from the mechanic haunted by insecurity into an artist capable of articulating the unspeakable feelings that once held him prisoner. As he stood near the entrance, Emma glided in beside him, radiating encouragement and warmth. "This is incredible, Jake. Look at how people are engaging with your work." "Thank you, Emma. But I just hope it resonates with them," he replied, catching sight of a group gathered around one of his pieces, an unfinished sculpture that embodied the journey of identity and acceptance. Their conversations flowed animatedly, weaving narratives surrounding the chaos of creativity, and for the first time, Jake saw his art do what he had hoped it would, foster connection. Throughout the evening, a subtle shift occurred, a transformation in Jake from intimidated artist to an engaging storyteller. Rather than shrinking under the scrutiny, he took the opportunity to speak about his experiences, sharing bits of the story behind each masterpiece. Attendees leaned in, their eyes wide with understanding, captivated not just by the craftsmanship but by the authenticity woven into the foundation of his creations. The gallery buzzed with conversation, and soon enough, voices of admiration rose above the din. "The way he captures emotion is extraordinary. I can feel the struggle through the brush strokes. It's real, it's relatable. This piece speaks to my own battles." In this harmonious atmosphere, validation poured in like sunlight through the large gallery windows. Each compliment bolstered his confidence, strengthening his resolve to continue evolving as an artist. It marked a profound shift. He understood now that he was no longer reliant on external approval. The applause, the discussions, the brief conversations with individuals who empathized with his journey, these were the pinnacles he sought all along. As the night progressed, the voice he had reclaimed resonated through the room. When the conversation turned back to the corporate giants, murmurs turned from fear to humor. It felt empowering to see people laugh at the concept that one must conform to be recognized, that an honest narrative, albeit messy and confined, had the power to dismantle barriers. When it was almost time to close the gallery doors, Jake spotted Robert Hayes hovering near a display. The man wore a facade of indifference as he flicked through the artworks, but hesitation danced in his eyes. Gathering strength, Jake approached him. "Hello, Mr. Hayes. I hope my art challenges your outlook on creativity," Jake said, his voice steady. Hayes looked up, surprise mingled with curiosity. "This isn't what I expected, Jake. There is a depth here. It's compelling." Jake clenched his jaw, stifling the urge to point out the condescension that had once struck so deep. Instead, he smiled slightly. "Thank you for acknowledging that. Art isn't about being perfect, it's about telling a truth that resonates." As the night came to a close, Jake felt a deep satisfaction arise within, a recognition of his journey and how far he had come. He had proven not just to the world but to himself that he was more than a mechanic or a poverty-stricken dreamer, he was an artist whose experiences held merit. In triumphant reflection, Jake realized he would carry this moment within him forever, a testament to his evolution shaped by each setback and breakthrough. Within this gallery converged the appreciation of art and the acceptance of identity that night had reaffirmed his purpose. As Jake prepared to leave, a newfound clarity washed over him. He was ready to embrace whatever came next. The next challenge awaited, but it would be approached with unwavering confidence and creativity, free of the chains of doubt that once weighed him down. He had found not only his artistry but a steadfast belief in himself to create and share the stories awaiting expression. This, he thought, was only the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.